Welcome everybody back. I ask you to take your seats. Let's get started. I once again would like to direct your attention to the Fda panel. We have a couple of new people sitting on the panel. So I'm going to go ahead and let you and Stacy introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Stacy Chin. I'm an allergist immunologist in the Office of New Drugs in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research.
Hello, us again.
Okay.
I'm Christine Mueller from the Office of Orphan Products Development.
I'm Sarah Eggers from CEDAR's Office of Strategic Programs.
I'm Tejashree Purahitcha, the Division Director for Division of Clinical Evaluation and Pharm Tox in OTAT CBER.
Okay, and hi, I'm Diane Maloney, Associate Director for Policy in CBER.
Jonathan Goldsmith, I'm the Associate Director of the Rare Diseases Program in the Office of New Drugs at CEDAR.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody getting back. I hope you got your lunches well without any kind of hiccups. It seemed to be going pretty smoothly. This afternoon, the first topic is about current approaches to treatment. And I'm going to invite our panelists, Joyce, Janet, Karen, Lois, and Anthony to come up, please. Oh, the ever popular. Not that those of you who were on the first panel. Thank you. So we're going to, can you hit the next slide, Chris, please? What we've asked this time for discussion, and we'll leave this up so everyone can see it, is what treatments are you currently using? How well do these treatments work? What are the most significant advantages and disadvantages or complications of the treatments? How is your by your current regime, and what treatment has the most positive impact on your quality of life? And as we found this morning, if somehow these questions are
current approaches to treatment. Not a lot was known about HAE in my early lifetime. Over the years, I was relegated to medieval HAE treatments that simply didn't work. I'm fortunate during a bad throat attack, a doctor at my local hospital had heard about the NIH and their studies that they were doing and suggested I went to the NIH. That was in '76, and that was the start of my journey. Finding and participating in HAE clinical trials in the search for a better life. I participated in the first, I'm going to bring clinical trials in it also. I participated in the first clinical trial at the age of 17 at NIH. I've been in 2 clinical trials since then, which were targeted directly towards being able to allow patients to live a normal life by treating and replacing the missing protein in my blood. Clinical trials aren't easy. It's a double-blind placebo portion, which means you have to go off your medicine and go on a placebo and suffer attacks. I was allowed rescue therapy for the trials, but just knowing I had to give up a therapy that worked well for me to try to find something better had a significant emotional toll during the trials. For me, the clinical trial site's a 3-hour drive one way, so it is a challenge, but it's well worth it. I treat every attack, regardless of location, due to not knowing when those attacks can move from hand to stomach to face to throat. I currently use a sub-Q version of the C1 inhibitor. The current treatment has changed my life exponentially. Back in the day when I was first diagnosed, all there was nothing at first. And then stanozol, oxandrin. Taking those, I'd go off of my speech. Going on those therapies for 30 years, I had a heart attack when I was 45 years old. So while they did keep me alive, and I'm grateful to having had those therapies, it's not optimum. So I'm really happy to see the therapies that we do have now. I've witnessed many milestones living at a young age with no therapy and being sick constantly, in and out of the hospital, missing school, work, activities, just like everyone said. Of course, I'm 59 years old, I admit that, and therapy has been only approved since 2008. So there were many, many dark days that I had been prescribed everything that they ever thought would be working for swelling. Today's modern therapies are wonderful and life-changing, as you've heard already many times today. But I still have to remember not to miss a dose, and I'm always aware of any little thing that used to bring on an attack. While my attacks are well controlled now, it's always in the back of my mind that I could have an attack anytime, anywhere. So I have to always remember to take my therapy wherever I am. It's very critical to have that care plan in place. In a perfect world, longer lasting therapies would help me live as if I didn't have HAE at all. A therapy that could soon ward off attacks for long periods of time would allow me to almost forget I have HAE. Therapies, even with easier methods of administration, are something that I'm greatly looking forward to and hopeful to see progress in my lifetime. Would I do clinical trials again? Of course, because one day I hope to live in a time when HAE is something that I have that doesn't have me.
My name is Joyce Wilmot, and I have HAE type 1. I started having recurring stomach attacks when I was in the early 1990s while I was in college. Everyone attributed the stomach issues to ulcers, college stress, stomach flus, etc. I was getting frustrated since no one was able to figure out what was wrong. Coincidentally, my older sister, who was in medical school at the time, also started having similar symptoms. So she dug into her medical books and was able to come up with a diagnosis for both of us. So in that way, I was very lucky that it took a little less than a year to get a diagnosis. After I finished college, I pretty much limped along. I was fortunate that I only had 5 to 10 attacks a year, most years, and so I was able to limp along. Anytime I had an attack, I would probably lose 3 or 4 days out of work, out of life, in and out of the hospitals. And I remember those days when, curled up on my bed waiting for an attack to end. I participated when the clinical trials came around, starting with the Baxter. I was participating in the trial. I remember I was pregnant with my twin girls when the Baxter trial was going on. And there was one point where the trial was discontinued. And I remember just in my bedroom just crying just because the trial was pretty much keeping my babies healthy at that point because I was getting an attack almost every week while I was pregnant. So when the clinical trials came around, I participated in pretty much all the ones that I could participate in. Currently, I am on not on prophylaxis. I have rescue medicines. My doctor started me on Varinerd when it was approved. And that takes care of my attacks pretty well as long as I take it early during the attack. If I take it too late, I would still have to deal with the residual swelling for another day or two. For the most part, that works really well. But I soon realized, that I needed something else. I was in the middle of a camping trip with my daughters for a Girl Scout shoot in the middle of nowhere, and I had a full-blown attack, and I realized I had no access to clean water, antibacterial soap, or any kind of clean surface to do my prepping for an infusion. So, it was at that point that I realized that I probably need something else. And so when Firazyr was approved, I spoke to my doctor, and we added that to our toolbox of how to handle my HAE attacks. So unfortunately, the HAE meds work different really for all of us. Firazyr for me will stop the attacks pretty quickly, the progression of the attacks. But there are times when I would get a rebound attack the day after. So even though it's a lot more convenient than my Berinert at a time, I still have to rely on C1 inhibitor some of the time to fully get rid of the attack. And so I'm just thankful that these days that the physicians have the several medications to choose from, because the treatment plan has to be customized for each individual. My daughter, who just turned 15, has recently started getting abdominal swells. So I have learned to infuse her. She's someone who's awfully terrified of needles. When she was 6, she would hide under a chair to keep the doctors away from giving her shots. And so it's been a challenge for her. And so I'm looking forward to a day when maybe there's a treatment that's easier to administer. I remember a couple months ago she had an attack, and she was dehydrated at the time, so I had a hard time finding a vein to do the infusion. I tried 3 or 4 times. I still couldn't get one. And so I started calling urgent cares and emergency rooms, hoping that I would get quick help in infusing her. And it was then that I realized that we still have a long way in educating doctors and emergency rooms as how to treat HAE. Because, the 2 or 3 urgent care near our house pretty much refused, our request for help. They said I couldn't bring the medication in. They just didn't feel comfortable giving her the medication. I called a couple of emergency rooms, and I wasn't getting a definite answer whether they would do it or not. Thankfully, that night, I was able to infuse her, and everything is okay. But I still have concerns over, what would happen the next time she has an attack and I cannot get vein access for her. So, I just want to stress the idea that we still do need better medications. Our pharmacy ships 2 doses at a time for us. And I'm just fearful that, a disruption in the supply line will take the medications away from us. And I just cannot imagine going back to the dark ages when we don't have medicine. And so, I'm just thankful for this opportunity to air our concerns. And hopefully the FDA will, see the need to keep the funds going into HAE research. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Janet Long. I'm also very grateful to the FDA for this opportunity to speak with you today. My story, is not very unsimilar from those you've heard, but it illustrates life without therapy, so that's where I'd like to start. I was 7 when I experienced my first HAE attacks, as far as I can remember. To this day, I'm haunted by the look of helplessness on my mother's face when she could only offer me a hot water bottle and a couple of baby aspirin. Treatment we both knew would do nothing to ease my suffering. As a teenager, each monthly period meant excruciating pain and days missed from school due to severe HAE abdominal attacks, and sleepovers with girlfriends meant a constant worry that I would need to call my mom to take me home because I was the one too sick to be a normal teenage girl at a sleepover. At 21, I experienced an abdominal attack so severe it caused internal bleeding, and I underwent an unnecessary exploratory laparotomy and spent a week in the ICU. Despite the innumerable tests I went through, no one could figure out what was wrong with me, and the ensuing years brought nothing but scores and scores of doctors who either admitted to being totally baffled or offered theories from sinus drainage to chronic colitis, and I knew none of these guesses were the answer. Over the years, I continued to suffer mainly abdominal attacks. I was tired of showing up at the ER only to be sent home, and every physician told me nothing could be done for me, and I would just have to learn to live with the pain. I vividly remember my first throat attack. My general practitioner had told me it was all in my head and that I was imagining my throat closing, so I took 2 Advil and went to sleep. And by all rights, I should not be here today. I should have died that night, except for a spontaneous remitting of the swelling. My abdominal attacks used to last for 3 days, but with some time in between attacks. With hormone replacement therapy, my attacks started to come one right after the other. 3 days of nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, followed by 3 more, and 3 more, and 3 more. And the toll on my body was so unbearable, I was convinced I was going to die. I faced what I believed was the very real possibility that my 3 beautiful young daughters would be left motherless. And I told my husband, if I don't make it through the night one night, please tell the girls that I love them. But after 40 years of suffering, a brilliant gastroenterologist unraveled the mystery of my life and diagnosed me with HAE. I know she saved my life because throat attacks were coming once a week, and one would surely have killed me. One of my 3 daughters inherited HAE from me. She was fortunate to be able to participate in clinical trials in middle and high school. She suffered tongue and throat attacks, which is not surprising in the teen years when stress is high, and we know that HAE is exacerbated by stress. Without access to clinical trials, she would have died on more than one occasion. I am so grateful for the trials for all of the now FDA-approved therapies. Today, my own HAE attacks are so severe and frequent that I need prophylactic therapy, but I keep an acute medicine with me at all times, according to the HAEA's Medical Advisory Board guidelines. This just makes good sense with a disease that is so unpredictable. And not all therapies work for all patients or even in the same way during all periods of your life. We're so fortunate to have more than one choice to treat HAE attacks. FDA-approved treatments meant I had an alternative to attenuated androgens and their debilitating side effects, which were my only option when diagnosed 18 years ago. My HAE physician and I agree that it is important to make my therapy choices according to my needs and to live a normal life. I'm grateful for the HAE experts that we have working alongside us who have also made possible these FDA-approved medicines. My grandmother had HAE, though no one knew it, of course, in those long ago days. Near the end of her life in the late 1970s, doctors did not know what to do about the pain and swelling in her face, so they cut all the nerves in her face. Current and newly developed HAE therapies mean we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. I hope that my daughter will never have to suffer as I did. Of course, the ultimate goal is a cure, or a treatment that is in essence a cure. But there is not a day that goes by that I am not more than thankful to still be alive, to see the advances in HAE drug development already achieved and still to come. Thank you so much.
My name is Karen Baird, and I reside in Houston, Texas. And I also want to thank the FDA, the panel that's here today, so much. Thank you so much for your time. I want to thank Donna Lipscomb. You're just a joy. Your sense of humor. I called you the comic relief in the hallway, but you're so compassionate too. And it's just such a pleasure to be here today. When I talked to Donna on the phone, we discussed a little bit, and she wanted me to share about the mother's heart. I feel that that's really the caregiver's heart, not just the mother's, but I want for just a moment today to talk to you about the mother's heart, the caregiver's heart, but also the perspective, so we don't get off track on the therapies that my children are using. I have 2 children who suffer with hereditary angioedema. My son Kyle showed his first symptoms at age 2, and he's now 33. My daughter Ava showed her first symptoms at age 15, and she's now 29. My husband Sandy is the carrier of HAE. He's 58 and has only swelled 2 times in his life, which occurred in his 40s. I feel he's sort of a marvel. I've spent the past 30 years pleading the cause of my children. I became my son's mother in 1984, and I became his caregiver in 1986. HAE has affected every aspect of his physical life, as Kyle has an attack every 4 days. The first 17 years of his life were filled with attacks, pain in his body, tears and anxiety with no treatment. And of course, as a mother, this called tears, pain, and anxiety in my heart. I felt that I was groping blindly in the dark. I was reaching out for anything I could touch to find any kind of stability for our family, all the while knowing that the worst could happen, and that would be a laryngeal swell. And as with all of us, I could not find a physician that could help me, that could explain to me, or how to even treat it. Our family history, there's 50% of us in the Baird family that have this disease, and they all knew very little about it. And so for over the past 4 generations that we can count back to, my son Kyle appears to have the most extreme battle with HAE. He seems to carry the greatest burden. It's affected his daily activities through all the chapters of his life: attendance in school from elementary to graduate school, participation in sports, family vacations, holidays, birthdays. Someone mentioned earlier about just the excitement. I can remember every birthday my son spent his entire time in the bathroom with diarrhea, even as a little boy, to where he didn't want to have a birthday because he associated his birthday with being sick. And all it was just he was excited about his birthday party. It was very sad. And then going on to college, and all of us know the dorm life, the dating. My family, we work in Africa, and our children work with us. And so that was a added difficulty for us of leaving the borders of the country with both of my children having this disease. My son is a professional now, a history teacher, a football coach, but he's now at a place in his life where his wife is the one working and he's the stay-at-home dad, because it really is the right thing for him right now, because he struggles so much, even with therapy. He just generally feels ill all the time. So despite his fortitude and his graciousness in having this disease and his faith and his hope, he just struggles on a daily basis. But we're so grateful for the day that we were introduced to HAEA. So grateful to Tony Castaldo, so grateful to so many people that really have changed our lives, that we feel that we are part of something. Kyle, after he was about 17, he started on stanozolol, an androgen, and after 5 years on that, he started having heart palpitations. And so he made the choice to take himself off of it, which was a very dark day for me, because for 5 years, I really felt that I could have a little bit of breathing space. I knew that the androgen was helping him. And as a mom, I just took a big, deep sigh. And so the day that he went off of it, it was terrible for me to say, no, Kyle, don't do that. I want you to stay on it. But I knew that he didn't need to be on it, but I wanted him on it. But he went off of it and his swelling began again. In 2011, Kyle began to infuse with Barinert. And it worked very, very well for him. And then he went, because of insurance purposes, he switched from that to Cinryze, and it has worked well, but not as well from his testimonial to it as Barinert. And as we all know now that the production of Cinryze seems to have taken a temporary halt, hopefully Kyle found himself last week with nothing. And once again, for himself, our family, and myself as his caregiver, even at 33, though that dark cloud comes back over me, because I realize that my son once again needs help. Ruconest has come to the front for us in a very quick and timely fashion, and now he will be starting on Ruconest this week. So we're very excited and grateful for that. In 2003, my daughter Ava, at age 15, had spent the weekend surfing, and on Monday when I picked her up from school, her hand was swollen. And I think that was one of the most difficult days of my life back then, because I drove home in the car trying to have a smile on my face, realizing that 15 years into her life, it never occurred to me that Ava would have it as well. And then to realize that both of my children have it. So I found myself as a caregiver in a position that all my people have it, everyone in my house. Since 2004, I've worked in 35 countries rescuing children. And do you remember our meeting with Tom DeLay, Tony? And I remember sitting there telling Congressman DeLay that I think one of the most disheartening things in my life as a mother is to come back to the United States and not even be able to rescue my own children. But again, there was a bright light as Ava began therapy treatment with Berinert in 2011. The quality of her life has greatly improved. Ava's different from Kyle in the sense that she swells 3 to 4 times a year, but it's always laryngeal. So for me, I consider her to be the more extreme of the two of my children. One would look at my children and see 2 beautiful adults now who appear to be completely healthy. They're both married, they're parents, they're productive, they work all over the world. Their therapies have changed their lives. Their therapies have given them security and given them freedom, and we're so grateful. But I go back in my mind as I finish to Christmas of 2016. My family was gathered at my table for dinner. It was Christmas Day, and Kyle was sitting beside me, and he began to act strange, saying that he felt his food wasn't going down the right way. And within seconds, Kyle collapsed over on me. And at that moment, as reality soaked in, I thought, it's Christmas Day, and I've lost my son. He was swelling, and we were immediately able to infuse him with Cinryze, which saved his life. And I remember my 2-year-old grandson, Beckett, crawling up on his daddy's chest and crying. Even at 2, he knew enough to know that something was really wrong with his daddy. And needless to say, it was really hard that night to carry on and open all of our gifts with a sobering reminder of this disease and how quickly it can change our lives. That night when I went to bed, here's what I thought. I thought to myself, if Kyle dies from HAE, he'll be in heaven and there will be no more suffering. And that seemed to be my comfort when I went to sleep. Now I realize in my children's lifetime that there really could be a cure. With the timeless research of our physicians, our scientists, the vision of a cure has begun to appear on the horizon within our reach. And I'm beginning to realize that HAE could actually be a memory in my children's life. It would be something in their past and not something in their future. So I'm not ready for my children to go to heaven so that their suffering can end. I'm ready for my children to have their heaven on earth.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Castaldo. My HA story is kind of boring. I was diagnosed at the NIH a long time ago. And I'm one of these people that actually did really well on androgens. I could get a relatively low dose of androgens and have some breakthrough attacks, but pretty much my story is very boring. 35 years on androgens. I tell everybody that, all of this is because of androgens. My doctor says, no, you eat too much, but, we'll go with whatever the story might be. But I would like to share the sentiments of the panel here and thank the FDA for conducting this patient-focused drug development meeting. And I think this really does show that the agency has a commitment to hearing the patient's voice, and hopefully we'll see that translated into the regulatory decisions as well. Also very happy that we have somebody from Cedar here. You'll be having a bunch of products up for your review. I think you have one now, and we would like to make sure that the message here from the patient gets percolated throughout the division, and hopefully Dr. Chowdhury will get a chance to look at the transcript as well. So we're glad everybody's here today. So being that my story is boring, what wasn't boring, however, was that of my daughter. Age 5, weekly abdominal attacks, horrific. Covered with erythema marginatum, which is the rash about 25% of us get. This was a really, really sick kid. And, we just had an intractable situation with her. And fast forward, we worked really hard to try to figure out a solution for this beautiful young child. 3 days a week at Georgetown Hematology Ward, we were frequent flyers there for fresh frozen plasma, which really kind of worked, but not real quite sure. Now I'm a compassionate dad. I have the disease. And I'll never forget one time on the way to Georgetown, my daughter just looked at me and said, Dad, all I really ever wanted was just to go to school. I'm a perennial C patient, a C student. So I looked at it and said, what? But then I got it. This was a kid who wasn't going to give up. All she really ever wanted to do was live a normal life. And she looked at me and said, can you help me? That's where it began. And that's where the advocacy that we see in front of us today. We have here in this audience some incredible patient advocates, people who've given up their day to come here, all to be part of a cause, and that's the HAE cause. And we've heard the stories today from each one of the individuals, each one of these advocates here today, the passion and their concern for themselves, for their children, and right amongst all of that is their children's children as well. So I just want to give you guys a hand for being here today. Thank you, HAE advocates. We really appreciate your participation. You make a difference. And why do you make a difference? Well, think about the dark days, and everybody's talked about the dark days. Some of you might remember that we had a program back before we got access to medicines where we actually imported medicines from overseas sources. And the agency was actually very helpful, and they enabled us to do a program where we would bring the medicines in, and we met certain provisions. And Mary Malarkey at the time was the head of compliance, and that program saved a lot of lives. But that motivated us further as a patient community to get organized, to work together. And we've heard testimonials today of how that's worked. Well, that's resulted in something really special at this juncture. There are many other disease states out there that don't have the kinds of advocates that are sitting in this room today, don't have the kind of physicians that are also sitting in this room today, and also the cooperation from the pharmaceutical companies. HAE now has 6 approved products to treat the disease. That is quite extraordinary given the limited size. Why did that happen? That has happened because of the people sitting in this room. We have galvanized patient community, and we'll talk about this a little later when we talk about clinical trials, but there has never been an instance where HAE patients haven't been willing to participate in clinical trials, and some of them are pretty difficult, quite frankly, and require a big commitment. But this community, this united and galvanized community, has never blanched from taking it on the chin and participating in clinical trials. We also have an incredible cadre of physician researchers, quite unique for a disease state like ours, given that this is really an ultra-orphan rare disease. And some of them are here today. They work selflessly. They care about the patients. They understand the disease. They understand the devastation that we've all heard about today, about what this can do to people's lives. And these physicians have been willing to participate in clinical trials, participate in patient care, participate in research, and do the things that are necessary, and that's part of it. And then we also have had industry, and I think we've all forged a great relationship. I think we forged an excellent relationship with industry, and thank goodness for their investment in these products, and that's where we are today. However, and this is a huge however, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you the game is not over by any means. The game is not over by any means. The Dr. Pierce, who I've had the pleasure of interacting with in the past, has been a CBER reviewer and knows the disease quite well. He said something very key a few minutes ago, well, I guess it was this morning, when he made his talk talking about hereditary angioedema. And he said, no approved therapy eliminates all attacks. Think about that for a second. So really, where are we right now? Yes, we finally, through the grace and goodness of this community, the physicians, the patients, pharmaceutical companies working together to get things done, we now have products where our lives have been transformed. But if you look at some of the studies that we do, we're not quite there yet. And let's just give you a couple of quick statistics. And I'm mindful of my time. I'm actually watching it here. But some statistics just to put some actual data and color. We actually did a quick survey of 980 patients not too long ago. And just, if anybody wants to think that the game is over for HAE, listen to just a snippet of some of these stats. 74% of the patients that we polled in our 980 patient sample said they had more than one attack a month. 30% of that sample said that they had more than one ER visit in the preceding 6 months. 50% said that they were somewhat to not at all satisfied with their available therapy. And basically, we've also found that 50% of the patients we polled either had used or were currently using an indwelling port. So that's the message here today. We've heard about the stories. We've heard even with therapy, there's still a high level of anxiety among our patients. There's still a fear that one day we might not wake up. So I think it's really important that the agency hears these messages. And when products come in front of you for review, it's important that you understand that there can't be any complacency. Obviously, as regulators, you are entrusted first to protect the public health and safety. I think we all agree with that. We think that's paramount importance. However, within the confines of that, we would just ask you to work closely, with industry, with expert physicians who can come in and speak to you about what's going on, because we still need and have a need for better therapies and ultimately a cure. Thank you.
Hello? How many of you in those conversations recognize your treatment stories? Everyone? Does anybody want to talk specifically about any particular treatment? Okay, let's go and do our next question, please. So which of the following medications do you currently take to prevent an attack? Now, I would pretend to read these, but then you would have reason to laugh at me. So, yes, I think, is this one where they can pick more than one? Okay, Chris, it's not working.
They're getting error messages.
Donna, it should be choose all that apply.
Okay. We're going to reboot this one. Sorry, guys.
Try again.
Hey, can we try? See if it's still not working? Well, we're going to go back to our time-honored tradition of hand raising. Okay? And I know that for some of you, if you're using them, raise your hand for each and every one that we're doing. So how many are using A? My slides back. I apologize. Okay, A was danazol or a similar steroid-based medication. Anybody? B. Thank you, Sunrisen. See? When it's here. Can you read?
Haegarda.
Haegarda? We're going to make this team pretend. Okay. Oh, D. Other? And E, currently I do not take any medications. Is it working? Okay, let's vote and see if you were lying to me when you were raising your hands. go ahead. That seems to track very much like your hand raising. I'm glad that you weren't telling me stories. So what about medicines that, wait a minute, what question are we on? Okay. Ross, what was the web like? I'm going to get on my...
Right, so like in the audience here, the most popular answer was other, and that was twice as frequent as collectively Cinryze and Haegarda, which were the other popular choices. There was only one participant from the web who was taking danazol, and everybody was taking something. Nobody chose choice E.
What about, let's talk about medicines that are used for treatments and attack. Chris, can you hit the next one? No, that's more. So which medications do you use to receive from your healthcare provider to treat acute attacks, and pick all that apply? Okay, let's go ahead and, has everyone had time to get all your responses? Chris, can you? All right. I think we'd heard a couple of you talk about how helpful for Zuer. Thank you. You're so kind to me, thank you. How well that's been. We're going to ask one more medication question, then I'm going to let you guys have some chance to talk to me about it. Chris? And then I'll check with you guys at the web. How was for 12?
Firazyr icatibant was the most popular choice, followed by Ruconest, then Kalbitor. Berinert was after that.
Okay, so very similar. And then the last question is which medication, oh.
Fourteen is next question.
Okay, I'm sorry. I clearly ate lunch and I had a candy bar and that might have been a mistake. Let's ask about your medications that you're using on the results. Especially for people who wrote other in this one, what are those treatments that you use? I'll get to you in a minute.
I think I already mentioned earlier that I was on the danazol for 33 years and just got off of it 3 months ago and started on the Berinert because of the cholesterol issues. So I'm taking that as a prophylactic now. I did have it for catastrophic attack, but now I'm actually taking it as a prophylactic.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, I was on from 1974 until 2011. I was on danazol, and then I switched from danazol for the last 5 years to oxandrone because it was less affecting me because it's less masculinization. And then I hit menopause, and the Danacrin was messing me up, or oxandrone. So I went off that, and I had 53 attacks 1 year. And then in 2011, I found the HAEA and met a doctor, and he mentioned Firazyr for me because it was available. I started using that. It cut down my attacks from 53 to about 25 the next year. but then I was starting to have rebound attacks. And so then I went on Cinryze. And then I was in Cinryze, but then I started again menopause, having hot flashes, and so I went a real low dose, 0.025 of bioidentical estrogen, which, because hot flashes every 15 minutes, the quality of life, I don't care if you have angioedema or not, it just is not, you have to balance quality of life with everything else happening. So the Cinryze, I was breaking through a little bit, and then it became unavailable in 2016. And so in 2016, I switched to Berinert. And then that's weight-based, and I haven't had any problems, well, except for real excitement or something with breakthroughs, and then I use Firazyr. And then I follow up after Firazyr with Berinert because of the 24-hour rebound that I have. So I guess what I'm saying, of all these therapies that were available, I've almost used all of them. And as life changes, as your experiences changes, for women, especially who have hormonal changes, you have to switch and use different things. And also in this case, it's just not the hormones, it's actually the companies. When the companies change and they can't provide the drug, there has to be something else out there that we can go to, because if I didn't have, I was in the clinical trial for subcutaneous, and I got the saline, unfortunately, and I started attacking every 2 or 3 days, and so I had to actually drop out of this particular clinical trial because it was just kind of too dangerous for me. So I guess what I'm saying there, have to have different drugs to go back and forth to.
Thank you. Did anybody else have other that you want to mention?
I wasn't going to mention about the treatments. I'm a physician. My name is Paula Bussey, and I take care of a large group of patients with HAE, and I just want to talk on the physician side. It's wonderful now to be able to provide patients with medications, but yet there are several frustrations that we have and that I would like to, be made aware of. One is that, there's a lot of paperwork that's involved in making the prescriptions, and sometimes very frustrating things. For example, if I've had patients that haven't had their medicines filled because, for example, that they have to prove that they have HAE, and I have blood work from several years ago that proves that they have HAE, but I'll get calls back from the insurance company saying, I need recent blood work. Well, this is genetic disease, it doesn't change. So patients have a lapse in their therapy, which is not good and extremely frustrating for myself. And another thing that I think is very important for physicians and everyone to be aware of is the proper use of the medications and the proper prescription patterns. Make sure that the patient really has HAE or has bradykinin-mediated angioedema, because with the shortages that we do have sometimes, when medications are not prescribed properly, the patients who need it may not have it. So those are some of my frustrations.
I'm Carol. Before I was diagnosed with HAE, I started taking testosterone for libido, which worked very nicely. But I noticed that same week I was getting an HAE attack on my way to work, and it was like half as bad. And I went, hey, just give me a couple hours, I continue on with work. And that was the first time since I was 10 years old that there was any deviation into an attack not being as bad. So when I was diagnosed with HAE, probably about 6 months later, my HAE doctor actually prescribed the testosterone for me for another 6 months because my attacks were so much less severe. And that was the other thing I used, and it helped me. I'm not on it anymore. My husband enjoyed it, but I couldn't take it anymore.
Okay, actually, let me ask the next question real quick, and I think that
I just wanted to mention, a lot of women have mentioned the role of hormones. Progesterone-only therapy can also be used sometimes. My daughter chose that route when there was no therapy currently approved by FDA, and it works for her. It doesn't work for everyone, to our point that not everything works for everyone, but sometimes progesterone-only can be effective for HAE.
Thank you. Thank you very much for adding that. We've heard in our conversation that when an attack is coming, you or your caregiver at home administer treatment. And so different people may feel different symptoms as harbingers of an upcoming attack. And so our next polling question is about when you feel a treatment is needed. And I think a couple of you have talked about that. Can you go to? Oh, I think you guys were answering 14 earlier when it was up. So, no symptoms appear, but you can feel attack coming on. Once symptoms interfere with your activity, once pain or discomfort from swelling becomes intolerable. Seems to be the most C and A. What about the web? Are they?
Similar response, CNA seems to be the most common.
Okay. Thank you. We would appreciate if some of you could share your experiences about this phase. We're going to go here.
For me, over the years, I've learned that effective treatment is to get it right away when the attack starts. So I've learned my prodromes, like the symptoms that start before the actual attack starts is when I treat. Because if I don't, then I'm already in the pain, the swelling has already started, and it takes longer to resolve. So I've learned how to do it that way.
Right here, Bob.
So just a comment here about this data here is quite remarkable and not in a good context, quite frankly, because I invite anybody who's a non-patient to think about how you would feel if you had to get sick to the point where pain or discomfort becomes intolerable before you could treat. That's just not an acceptable way to look at it. Now, recognizing there are certain situations where you can't get to the treatment soon enough, but this is something that I think our medical advisors have always stressed, and it's so important that for those patients that are on-demand therapy, that the earlier you treat, the better, because you can stop whatever is going on biochemically that's causing the swelling. You can stop that pretty quick with the available treatments. But if you don't stop it and you let the swelling get into your tissues, you're sick. And then it's up to your body to reabsorb those fluids, and you'll be sick until it does that. And let me just make one other point that I think is very clear as we've talked about the array of acute therapies that we have available for us. It is very important that everyone understands there is variability in effect, and we hear this a lot from our patient community. There is a lot of variability in how various therapies work for various patients. And those are valid concerns. So, one of the things we're blessed with at this juncture is that we have options. We do have therapeutic options, but that's a good thing because what we find en masse is that not everything works for everybody in the same way.
Okay, well, I want to say as a patient, it's really important to treat early, as all of us know, to just shut that pathway down. You're going to feel a lot better sooner. But in talking to some patients, I've heard before, well, I'm just going to deal with it if it's like an attack on my hand or my foot. I'm not sure how a lot of people are, but I know for me it's never just my hand. And you never know. It could travel to various places, abdominal, even laryngeal. So it's just really important to treat every attack as soon as possible.
For me, I need an F on there because I have to wait for my symptoms to appear, but I cannot take them until they are intolerable. As soon as they appear and I'm sure it's an attack, I want to treat right then. But my symptoms have to appear, otherwise I don't know it's an attack.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Liz again, and so I think there's this two sides of a coin for many of us who've gone so long without diagnosis. So one of the positives is I know those prodrome, however you say that, those warning symptoms, I know them really well because I suffered for so long and I learned my body so well the flip side of that is you begin to think suffering's supposed to be part of your life. And so I have this weird human psychology around like, oh, it's just a hand attack and, this is my lot in life. And so I really want to say a huge thanks to the HAEA because I think very loudly and frequently say, treat attacks early because it's more effective and treat every attack because it's your right. Like it's your right and we have that benefit because we have these therapies not to have to suffer. But there's still this like weird human psychology that it's important that my husband and that my dad has heard that so they can remind me when I have an attack, like, oh yeah, I should do this because sometimes I need that extra voice because suffering had become so my normal.
Okay.
Yeah, I was always told from my doctors, because I take an acute therapy, that if I would have swelling in my face or my throat or my stomach, to take the medication right away, but not to take it from my hands or my feet. So I'm just like recently, like I just deal with a foot or a hand swell. But it is very interruptive, and I think I'm going to start taking from my hands and feet. So, but I just wanted to make a comment too, like some of the questions here. Sometimes we'll wake up in the middle of the night too with a throat swell. So it's not like we're thinking, oh, I'm starting to feel like you don't know you're having it. You're sleeping and you're waking up at 3 a.m. and your face is swelling or your throat's swelling. You're like, oh no, is this real? And so, and then you treat.
Thanks. We're going to take about 2 more.
I want to speak to what Liz said. My name is Katie again. So you say to treat. Katie Conklin. So to treat when you first start having an attack, and I know from experience, if I start to have an attack, if I take that medication immediately, I feel better, and that usually stops the attack. However, with the shortage of medication, most recently, my last dose of Cinryze was on September 10th. 3 days later, I began to have attacks. I had an attack for 11 days. I am lucky that I had Firazyr on hand. However, Firazyr did not stop the attack. I ran out of Firazyr, and it was a battle to get Firazyr. So I'm always hesitant to treat a hand or a foot attack when I am low on medication, because what if I have that laryngeal attack? And by goodness, I'd rather suffer through a hand and a foot attack than to have a laryngeal attack. My children watched me leave my house when they were 3 and 5 years old on Christmas Day. I'll never get that back. But I was having severe attacks. Every time I leave my house to go to the ER, my children are terrified. Mommy's not coming home. Like Tony, I'm a lucky one. My story is very boring. But I have many members of my family that have this disease, and not having access to medication is detrimental to our health.
I think something that's really important about what's up here is that we wait until there's pain or discomfort that's intolerable. Is that I know for me, my story doesn't go nearly as long as a lot of people in the room, but I had so many years where doctors chalked it up to, really weird things or just, wrote me off. So a lot of times I convince myself that maybe it's not an attack until it becomes intolerable, because then you're like, well, I guess this is what it actually is. So I think that 43% sort of holds that true too, that a lot of us feel that like we can say, oh, maybe I have, a cold, or maybe it's just a headache, or maybe I just don't feel great this morning. And then 4 hours later, we're in that intolerable discomfort. So I think that a lot of us do that as well. I've heard people say that they wait too long because they think maybe it's not necessarily what we all know it actually really is.
Thank you. Was there anybody on the web that we want to?
Just one web participant, David, mentioned that he treats at when symptoms are recognized. He does not wait until they interfere with his activity or become intolerable.
Also, Jennifer from the web is echoing what Ross just said, that if they don't treat the first attack, it's really hard for them to get hand off taking care of the rest of it. It's better to treat that first, otherwise it's hard for them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys. So let's talk about your decisions of choosing different treatments or how you choose one treatment over the other. Question 15. So aside from the cure, when considering a new treatment for your condition, which benefits would you consider the most meaningful? And you can choose up to 2. So well, it's a test, and you're all going to have to pass it. So reduction in attack frequency, reduction in severity, rapid response to treatment of acute attacks, and completeness of response to treatment of acute attacks. So we should have said all that apply. My new obsession is Hamilton, so I feel like we could sing. You should have been in the room when it happened. Sorry. Okay, can we see? So for us is reduction in attack frequency, and you kind of did answer more than one, considering B and C are almost a statistical tie. What does the web look like?
So reduction in attack frequency and rapidity of response are getting the highest responses, but just by a small margin. Next comes reduction in attack severity, and lastly, completeness of the response to treatment of acute attacks.
Okay. Does anyone want to talk about the 2 choices that they picked? I didn't talk to her last time, so I'm going to pick her.
For me, Kelsey. For me, being in college, it's important for me to be able to get back into the swing of things quickly. Because when I miss I have one class that's 3 hours, so if I miss that class once, I miss a whole week of material. But I also think it's important to mention that some people don't have a choice in their medications. So the beginning for me, because I was a patient with normal C1, I was given 2 options for acute attacks. And I didn't get to pick which medications I was on. I didn't get to try different ones. So some patients don't have that option.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, to piggyback on, I'm so sorry, I always forget your name. Kelsey, yes. We have the same type, and we only can participate in the acute side of things. And however, I was diagnosed a little earlier, so I was able to try the prophylactic, even though we thought it may fail, it did. But I was hoping and praying that it would work for me. And that was Sunrise. So then after that, I had to get back on those dreaded androgens. And yes, it did blow me up, Tony, so I do understand. But then the acute tax came, acute rescue medicine came, and first was Calbator. Unfortunately for me, as I told you earlier, I have a young son I had to take care of, and he also had health issues. So having to have that administered in the hospital was not a good fit for me. So I went to Firazyr when that finally came aboard, and that has given me a little bit more autonomy. However, I'm here today because there are new medications that perhaps on the same vein of our acute medications that we have may provide prophylactics. And I think that I answered A and B, and I'm just hoping that A and B could really be preventing attacks and not even B being an issue, because I won't have an attack to have severity. But research is so crucial for some of us who don't have options to flip-flop to. And I just thank you for having us here. But we definitely have to continue. Like they said, there is not an option for everyone. We all have variability in how we respond to certain attacks. And it's just, I just really hope that we can get a prophylactic for people who only have the rescue medication.
Okay, would you like to talk a little bit about the treatments you...
So the good news is about the HA with normal C1 inhibitor. There is a significant amount of research being done. As a matter of fact, out at the Angioedema Center at the University of California, San Diego, they've probably seen more normal C1 inhibitor patients than just about any center in the United States. And they're taking the blood samples and they're really thinking it through. We have some incredible scientific minds that are looking at it, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they're able to come up with a biomarker, which simply means that they can then better look at what the cause is and then determine what an appropriate therapeutic regimen might be. So normal C1 inhibitor right now, HA with normal C1 inhibitor is still a brave world, if you will. There's just lots of elements of it that we just don't understand. But we're very excited about the work that's going on at the Angioedema Center and their focus. And the Hereditary Angioedema Association has really been very active in making sure that that research is being funded. And the Angioedema Center also, apropos of some of the things we've talked about here with the treatments, they're looking towards this notion of, again, precision medicine. Now, this has nothing to do with the regulatory side of things, because our wonderful friends at the FDA, they are responsible for reviewing candidate medicines and approving them for license. But there are other types of research being done that can actually look at a current medicine and find maybe what's the right dose, the right incidence of taking the disease and so forth. One other point I want to make, I think, is important for all of us here sitting in this room. And that is, as we get better preventive therapies, and if you look at what's being thought about in the pipeline, you have currently, there's lanadelumab is in the clinic. AGARDA was just approved. There's probably going to be clinical trials with a kallikrein inhibitor pill form, probably next year, if I read the press releases correctly. There are two other companies that have pill forms, kallikrein inhibitors, that are looking at it. There's also a trial going on with a pill form for acute. And I can tell you also that two other companies have been in touch with the HA Association that are looking at gene therapy solutions for this disease. So there's a lot going on out there right now. And so just keep in mind that all that's happening because we also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we also do want to make sure that everybody's willing and continues to be willing to go and participate in clinical trials as we go forward. So stay tuned, folks. There's a lot in the hopper.
Well, since he's led us to the clinical trials question, we're going to go to our next question, which is the precursor to the clinical trials question. So which of the following factors, which three, I've given you one more to pick, would you rank as most important to your decisions about using treatments to treat your condition? So again, use up to three. How the medication is administered, how frequently the medication is administered, access to treatment, possibility of common and non-severe side effects, possibility of infrequent but serious, severe side effects, previous improvement in response to a similar treatment, previous lack of improvement from another treatment. I can, and I can explain it by walking over to Larissa and letting her.
So I guess it's the G that needed to be explained, right? If you've previously used some type of treatment and it didn't work for you, would you choose that treatment or category of treatment again, or would you choose something else? You would obviously choose something else. So if that's something that would influence your decision to choose your next treatment, then that's the G.
Did that help? Thank you. We've got a few more going. And let's go ahead and close this poll. So in looking at our top 3 factors, the first one, how the medication is administered, is the most often cited, followed by access to treatment, cost, insurance coverage. And then it's almost a tie between B and E, really, how frequently it's administered or the possibility of infrequent but serious and severe side effects. How does the web pair up to that?
It really looks very similar.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like to me that really, and I think we've heard about PICC lines and ports and sterile environments, that there's a lot to go in when you think about what medication you want to use. Is there anything else about a treatment that you are thinking about before we go and ask the question?
My name is Stephanie, and I'm concerned also about like long-term effects of these medications. Like if I'm 25 years old now, if I'm still taking this medicine at 75 years old, through the next 50 years, if I'm on the same treatment, what are the side effects going to be for that?
Okay. Anybody else want to?
Peggy, I didn't get a chance to vote off for all these, but I'm going to say it depends on each of these becomes important in different situations. Like in travel, or my husband helps me infuse if he has a migraine or something, or he's away, how the medication, if I can use subcutaneous. And then the other one is like, again, it's like, I'm older now. I'm 62 years old. So that's something I was thinking about for long-term effects, is that, it's like, okay, it's going to help me now, but it's going to take 30 years for it to damage my liver. Well, okay, if it's 30 years to damage my liver, I probably don't have 30 years to live, so maybe I'll do that one as opposed to somebody that's 20 that, they really have to think about that. So I think, again, the different situations you have in your different age, and also, the different, how serious. Some people's attacks come within 10 minutes. Some people's come within, a day. So again, it switches back and forth. And then insurance, I have good insurance. Other people, they can't get the treatment. They don't have a choice because they're insurance companies. And they're, financial.
Thank you. We're going to take one more, and then I'm going to ask the FDA panel if you have any follow-up questions.
Well, there's so many decisions we have to make on a personal basis about all of those, but one of the decisions we don't get to make in some cases is C, because what the FDA does and all the hard work they put in about how the medication should be given and the quantity per day because of the data that we have given them. What if your insurance company balks and say you're supposed to be able to take 3 doses per day, but your medical insurance says, well, I'm only going to give you 3 boxes a month? What do we do then for the other 20-something days and have an attack when you and your wisdom and us and our hard work have proven otherwise? So sometimes C is taken out of our hands, and it's not even a choice.
Thank you. The panel, do you have any questions?
Hi, I'm Tejashri Purohit-Sheth, and I want to go back to the questions that was asked of you regarding the prophylactic treatment. So many of you picked other, so I was very interested in learning what other therapies for prophylaxis have you been using outside of danazol or Cinryze or Haegarda. Thank you.
I have been using the Sunrise, and with the recent manufacturing problem, I was out. I was lucky enough to have access to Ruconest, and unfortunately, I'm having small episodes start after I do a dose. So 3 or 4 days pass, and I start to have another episode. So I'm practically on the same prophylactic schedule. I'm just experiencing that kind of lack of C1 is triggering episodes for me. So it's practically prophylactic for me right now. I know it's not on. I know it's off label, so that's why I was reluctant to raise my hand earlier. But that's unfortunately kind of the situation that I'm in. I responded very, very well to the Sunrise, and it was a literal life changer. And the Ruconest has been great and kind of bridging that gap for me. But unfortunately, if I try to go without, I end up having another episode start. And we've already talked about the importance of treating when we first see a sign. So.
I'm Mike from Ohio. I've been treating prophylactically with a study medication that's been working very well for me.
Anybody else? I'll get to
Thankfully, I have been able to actually get on the clinical trial for lanadelumab. So I'm no longer actually taking a prophylactic, but instead just taking part of the research trial.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else on the panel? Oh, you go on.
Sorry. I have one more question. Many of you mentioned that you have some warning symptoms before your swelling actually starts. I was interested in understanding what some of these warning symptoms or sensations felt like. Wow.
Okay.
I'm Debbie. I get, you've given it a name, Tony, the rash under your skin. And also just extreme fatigue, like you just can't go another step.
I'll get that rash too, and also before an abdominal attack, I get this specific sort of vague headache that it's the only time I get it is the day before an abdominal to start.
I get very dizzy and lightheaded, and that's one of my first signals. Fatigue is a big one for me, but also like severe dehydration to the point where like I'm drinking water and it's not helping like resolve the dehydration and the cotton mouth.
Adina. For me, I'm fortunate in that most of my episodes are in my extremities, which is kind of a downfall because it's easy to overlook those and not consider them important, but I'll feel a tightness or I'll feel kind of an ache. My knees are really bad about it, and I'll try to wait to see if it is, and then it starts to show that red area, so I know, and I infuse.
I'll get abdominal swells, and I can't recognize it unless I have cramping before, until my stomach has already cut everything off, and it's just this putrid burps. And at that point in time, even taking Berinert right then, I still have like a 2-day attack. Everything's got to go through and up and out, but it's not as severe as it used to be, which would be days and days and days.
I have a lot of peripheral limb swelling as well. And even on my face, I get tingling or a little itching. It's not itching like a normal itch, but it's just a sensation, but tingling. And hours later, that area typically will swell.
My name is Fran. I have many of the pre-symptoms that a lot of these folks have talked about, fatigue and so on. One of the things that I think is interesting is I feel like I'm an out-of-focus picture. I feel like I'm sort of out of myself. I keep moving, but I just don't feel right. The other thing is that my right eye gets so bloodshot and painful. You can't even look at me. It just makes you cringe. And as soon as the attack comes on, the redness and the red, goes completely, the bloodshot goes completely away. And what else? Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
My name's Amy. I don't have HAE, Dakota does. But prior to her being on a prophylactic, I used to be able to tell her within 12 to 24 hours when she would have an attack, because she would get what I dubbed HAE PMS. She would get cranky and short-tempered and just not happy. So there was an emotional side to it that she also gets the lacy rash very often. And at one point, a surgeon had called her telling her he wasn't going to put in her port. He was on the phone with her, and I literally watched the rash crawl across her neck. Scared the bejeebers out of me. I took the phone from her and would not let the surgeon talk to her any longer. What he was saying, literally, I watched him send her into an attack. But there is HAE PMS, I'm telling you.
I think we have some.
Donna, I have one more, just one more.
Okay, but let me talk to the people on the web first, and then we'll get there.
Diane on the web says that she feels like she's done too many sit-ups. Then the swelling becomes obvious afterwards. Her waist circumference goes from 37 inches to over 40 inches during the attack. So some people think it looks like she's pregnant when she's experiencing an attack.
Also, some other comments that some of these prodromal symptoms include bad breath and foul-smelling gas. So that can happen just before the attacks.
We have one more.
I'm just going to reiterate what Amy said. She kind of took my line. I was Jim when he was 5, and I could always see an episode coming because he was moody. We didn't necessarily call it PMS, Amy, but, well, it's putting up with mama. But anyway, he had a lot of the behavior and the irritability I could see within a day or two. Then he'd sleep a lot, and then after the episode, it was the opposite swing of the emotional pendulum. He would be real sappy and sweet and overly affectionate. So that was like a rebound for him, but I could always tell when he was getting ready to have one with the rash and everything too.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you. So I think that's an easy lead into our next discussion topic. We're going to go to topic 3, which is the possibility of clinical trial participation. Now, I'm pretty sure I heard a couple of you say you've been on clinical trials, you believe in them. I've heard a cheerleader back there, so I think this will be an interesting conversation for us. The next one. So these are really kind of what I want you to think about when you're answering the question. So if you had the opportunity to consider participating in a clinical trial, studying experimental treatments, what aspects would you consider when deciding whether or not to participate? And if you have previously participated in clinical trials, discuss your own experience, whether favorable or unfavorable, and explain why you chose to participate. Okay? So if you had the opportunity to participate in a clinical trial with investigational treatment, which of the following best describes your thoughts? Yes, I would consider participating. No, I would decline the offer to participate, and maybe depending on various factors. And you know we're going to talk about those various factors. Okay. Go ahead. So only 5% said no, but 65 is a resounding yes, and 30% maybe, depending on various factors. How did the web look on that?
So no one said no. So they would all participate.
So everyone will participate online?
Some of them will, it depends.
Okay, great. And although several products have been made available, okay, this is what happens. I see a hand up. I start thinking I have to go back to her. So tell us a little bit about your decision.
Like my name is Dakota again. Like my mother mentioned in the first half, I became septic and nearly died last year. And I ended up getting my port removed, got my PICC put in, and I went to go talk to my specialist about new medications, like what to do from there. And he did not trust the research trial if there was going to be a placebo in it. I swelled way too much, way too often, and way too severe to even consider taking a placebo. But I was able to join the current trial because it's open label and I know I'm getting the medication daily. So the factor is that I need to make sure I don't end up in the hospital constantly because of my attacks.
Thanks. Anyone else want to talk about their experience? Okay.
Hello, I'm Mike from Ohio. I chose to be involved in as many clinical trials as I could when my wife and I were having our first child because I didn't want my child to suffer the way that I have. We've seen a lot of great medications come along. And out of my 3 children, my youngest daughter is the only one that's currently diagnosed with this disease. And I want to have better treatments for her if she ever does start presenting with this. I participate as much as I can in hopes that she never has to suffer.
Thank you. I think I saw a hand here, but did you want to?
Yeah, I participated in one of the clinical trials, but it was either you got the drug or you didn't get the drug, and there was no escape clause in terms of. Unfortunately, I think I got the saline, because I had to drop out because again I would have ended up in the hospital because I was almost every day I was attacking. So I guess when the clinical trials are brought up, there has to be some way to, since it's also stressful and mental, to allow the people to know that you can escape, get the real drug or open label, and if it's not working for you and you're seriously suffering.
Thank you. All right. Okay.
I think Dakota brought up a really good point. Both speakers brought up a good point. And that is at what point, does an institutional review board determine that maybe a placebo is not appropriate? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think that's something, though, that as the current treatments get approved and are more effective or are effective, particularly the prophylactic treatments, at what point do IRBs or even patients begin to wonder, do I really, can I afford to participate? Do I want to get sick if I have not been sick before? That's kind of sort of an ethical and regulatory decision going forward that I think is going to be really interesting.
Thanks. I think the next question. Nothing.
I just wanted to talk back to the issue about
Sure.
open label. No trial should have less than the standard of care. You either get the approved therapy, you have lots of them. That's the standard of care. That has to be the comparator for a licensure trial. You can't get less than that. That wouldn't be an ethical trial. So if it's an open label trial, often it's because they've already finished the testing phase of the drug and they've enlarged the access. So because they have promising data, they have a treatment IND and they let other people come into the trial and get the drug. And they get additional safety and efficacy information from that group. But if there are approved therapies, that's the standard of care. You can't get less than the standard of care.
Okay.
So are you saying that in a phase 1 trial for an angioedema drug, the placebo would be an approved therapy, not a placebo?
It's a phase 1 trial. So phase 1 trial is really a safety trial.
Right.
And it's a first look in humans of the use of that drug. So it's important to have a true placebo arm to understand what the adverse effects are that you can attribute to the drug versus what you might attribute to getting the placebo.
Right, but I thought,
But it's
so
not
I
for
guess that's what I'm
treatment.
asking, because you just said that it wouldn't be ethical to have the standard of, or the,
In a
the-
treatment trial, right, but that's a
oh,
safety
but the
trial.
safety trial still,
It's a
the
safety
phase one
trial. It's
still
trying to
needs
learn,
the true
just get to
placebo.
first in human information.
Right. Yeah, I do think, I mean, and I actually work in clinical trials, well, in an academic medical center in clinical trials administration. So I do think that that's a problem, not just for hereditary angioedema, but for other serious rare diseases, is that, you know, as you've heard today, going with a placebo is life-threatening for us. And so I think I've participated in a clinical trial for the same reason as, I think his name is Mike, behind me. I have 2 kids. I don't want them to go through what I and my family have been through. But, you know, and I understand the importance of the first in humans information and data, but, you know, maybe there's a discussion that needs to happen about, you know, what is the difference if you can blind the treatment and know that one treatment is an approved therapy and one is the first in humans, then why is that data any worse than the other? I mean, I know, because with the placebo, you risk, if you want to talk about SAEs, death is certainly the worst of all of them, and we wouldn't want to put people through that possibility if
I'm
we
not
could avoid
arguing
it.
about that, but most of these are like single dose. You know, it's a placebo-controlled trial, but it's like a single dose or it's multiple doses, and it won't go on terribly long, those studies. It might be 2-week studies, 4-week
Okay.
studies, just to get an idea, because if there's some terrible adverse event with the new trial, it will probably show up right away. And you don't know, you don't have equipoise, because you work to trial work. You don't know if the new therapy really is better. It may have been given in an animal model, if you're lucky, and you know something about it, but it may not. And there's just kind of like internet chatter, oh, this is a great drug. But the quickest way to licensure is to do a double-blind prospective controlled trial, a randomized controlled trial. That gets you the most data in the shortest time. And if you randomize from the first participant in a trial, you'll get that data even sooner. And it's a hard undertaking. I know there was recently an approved therapy for spinal muscular atrophy. And I know that community thought long and hard about doing a gold standard trial, but that's what they decided to do. And the families volunteered to be in a placebo arm. And that trial was cut short. It was scheduled for like 140 people. It was analyzed with 85 people. We did our review in about 3 months. It just truncated the process dramatically because it had a good effect. So if you can get to that, I think that's what you should aim for.
Okay, we are getting close on time, so let's go ahead and get these next questions. That they're really kind of centering on this conversation that we had already. The next one is, you hear the stop because I was so surprised to see that warning box up there. Kind of with what we're talking about. Warning, clinical trial, possible double blind. Thank you. So what reasons would influence your decision for the study? This is exactly what you were talking about, because keeping in mind that to participate in some trials, you might need to temporarily discontinue your current treatment or receive a placebo for a period. So really, this is giving everybody kind of a chance to have that conversation. My current treatment does not work. These are the reasons you would do this. Okay? Your current treatment causes side effects. Do you think your condition is well controlled and discontinuation of my current treatment will not result in occurrence of new attacks? So I'm willing to participate. Or I think my condition is well controlled, but I'm willing to participate as long as I can receive proper treatment from an FDA approved product should attacks occur. There's going to, once we give you just a little more minute to finish answering this, we've got 3 more questions. We're going to do them all at once and kind of summarize. Okay? Chris? So it seems like as long as you can get some treatment, you would be willing to do this. Okay, the next question is, so newer treatments are being developed all the time and many gene therapies hold promise. It's extremely important to know how you're thinking about the benefits and the risk. So even if there's the treatment might result in a cure but carry a small risk for a serious side effect such as cancer, would you be willing to participate? Huh? I'm sorry. Point taken. So what about the web? How does that? Huh?
Right. So the most popular choice was maybe, followed by no. 10% of respondents said yes.
Okay. Let's go to the next question. Would you be willing, so for rare disorders, including genetic, it's important to collect data to better understand the natural history. So in these kind of clinical trials, you won't be getting any particular treatment. They're just going to kind of monitor you over time. Would you participate in this kind of study? Yes, it has nothing, they're really checking you and on your treatment. So yes or no? So most of you would do natural history.
Can I just say, Donna, the USHAEA has a scientific registry which does this exact thing, so that may account a little bit for the 100%. But this is something that we value as well. It's very important to trace the history of these new medications as well within our patients and the effect on the quality of life.
Okay, thank you. I think we've talked a lot about clinical trials and does anybody want to make sure that their kind of voice is heard in how you think about clinical trials, whether you participate? Okay.
I feel that as a community, we've had access to medication for such a short time. Most of us do remember what the dark ages were like. Therefore, a lot of us don't want to be complacent in our treatment, and a lot of us still want to strive for better treatment, not only for ourselves, but for our children, because we haven't had access to treatment that long.
I just want to speak, this is Lydia, from the kind of my professional side of the coin, in that I've been working with clinical trials administration for about almost 2 years now, but I've been in an academic medical center for 11 years. And I think apart from the patient side of the coin, the regulatory and administrative burden of getting clinical trials started, which I'm sure you guys hear about all the time, actually kind of deters physicians from even becoming researchers. And so I think that, we certainly need to do a good job as patients of advocating for ourselves and letting our providers know what risks we are willing to accept. I remember seeing the inclusion-exclusion criteria for a study for Sjogren's syndrome recently, where the part of the criteria were that you couldn't have ever taken a biologic treatment, which pretty much excludes everyone with that disease in a lot of cases. So I think that from the FDA perspective, just considering, and you guys probably already do, but some leniency for diseases like ours, where while we don't want to get cancer, I'm okay with hearing that I may feel nauseated because it's probably not going to be as bad as the nausea I experience when I'm having an abdominal attack. And I'm okay with, understanding that every clinical trial has some risk of a serious adverse event if I have a physician or a researcher who can really explain what that means. All those drug commercials now with the long, long list of things that happen to, a fraction of a percentage of the people on the study. I think that those are important things to add when you're asking questions like, would you be willing to take on the risk of getting cancer? Well, what is small? If it's a 5% risk, well, no. But if it's a 0.5%, maybe I would. So just kind of considering those things when you guys are reviewing new trials as well.
Back in 2005, I had reached such a low ebb that I was willing to do anything, and that's when the LEV trial, which was the first in a long while, which has turned out to be Sunrise, opened up, and they told me the good news after I went there for 2 weeks to qualify that I was sick enough to be in their study. I'd never been so happy in my whole life. That lasted, I guess, 3 years, almost 3.5 years, and it was a double blind. And I kissed the ground that that they walked on, because Sunrise changed my life absolutely over the years, and I have been on it since. Over the years, I have been asked by various people to, would I be willing to become part of another trial? Well, I would have had to have given up Sunrise. I was not willing to do that. I finally had a quality of life. I wasn't going to give up a known for an unknown. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now that, Sunrise is, who knows where the production of it is, and they're, I'm waiting for Haegarda, there may be something that would be a possibility. And I would have to still think about that very carefully. The other thing that I learned in changing from Sunrise to Haegarda is an insurance situation, which really stunned me, because as expensive as all these medications are, I'm on Medicare with a Part D. So, I was walking out with, thousands of dollars worth of medicine every month with no copay. Well, when I got a phone call that said, oh, by the way, dear old person, you're at the donut hole, and now for the first month you'll have to pay $2,000, and then the second month you have to pay $5,000. I went, whoa, who can cough that up? Well, obviously there is assistance out there, and I have pursued that, and so we're on the road to do that, which then brings me around to, we are in Washington, D.C. Congress is once again going to be messing with our pre-existing conditions, along with other things. And, I wonder, I do question, has anyone in Congress ever had a chronic illness? Has anybody there been sick? Does anybody know anybody who's been sick? Because once you have, you wouldn't feel the way a lot of people do. So, my cry is for people to do something about that and to press people that we exist and we have pre-existing, and some people are born with pre-existing. There's nothing we can do about that. And you can't be taking our insurance away from us or our help away from us. The other thing is, I did want to ask, because we are in these, we have, the Sunrise this is not the first time they've been in a quote shortage or a, manufacturing issue. Does anyone have any kind of control or pressure over these kinds of pharma companies to make sure that there is regular supply, or are we just at the mercy, thank you, somebody who said that, at the mercy of this situation? Because it's really a frightening prospect for most of us, all of us sitting in this room.
Last kind of comment, and then we're going to see if we can address an issue.
Okay, Miles is my name. One of the things I wanted to say about being able to get a hold of the drugs and get it properly. We've had drugs shipped to us that were supposed to be refrigerated that were not refrigerated. We've had wrong doses. We've had the doses mistranslated. A lot of the pharmaceutical companies do not know how to supply correctly. Personally, for my wife, I had to go up against the general counsel of a major drug provider and the general counsel of a major insurance company just to be able to get the proper medication for my wife. That is our only recourse that I've seen at this point that we have. And if you don't have what it takes to stand up against general counsels, then you're doomed. And I don't know how many people have that strength.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this is a one more chance to ask the panel if you have any questions. Right now, we're a little behind. We're going to do the public comment period, and we have 4 speakers. They'll be doing about 5 minutes at the, I think, each, and then we'll kind of close up.
All right. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. For the transcriptionist, I'm Lonnie Warren Henderson. First speaker, Paula Busey, Mount Sinai Hospital. Mike, I'm sorry to stand up, Mike.
Okay. Hi, my name is Paula, and as I mentioned before, I take care of a large group of patients with hereditary angioedema, which I feel very fortunate to. But one thing that we've been talking about is the designs of the clinical trials, and it does bring a really good point up about the use of placebo and some of the designs. I don't feel right asking my patients to participate in trials if they, I don't want them to feel obligated to me to come off of a medication. I understand some patients will do that because they want to get better therapies, but it puts me in a bind, and that's not good for the community of patients with HAE. If there's some way that we can design better trials or formats using somewhat of historical data on patients, or have a guarantee that we have crossover studies where all patients get medications. I know that you have to show that the drugs work, and I understand that, the reason for a placebo, but it really makes it difficult. And part of the goal for HAE therapy is to have patients have medications that can be given easily and conveniently without the use of injections, and really to have patients maintain a good quality of life. So I would just like to put a plug in for easier designs for patients to participate in trials.
Thank you. Second speaker, Mark Rydell, University of California, San Diego.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. I'm Mark Rydell. I'm a physician at the University of California in San Diego, where I work at the Angioedema Center there with my colleagues, Dr. Christensen and Dr. Zuer. A couple of quick thank yous. First, I want to thank all of the participants here, the patients and their families. I hear these stories. I've heard hundreds of these stories, and the good news is you never get accustomed to hearing these things. We should never become accustomed to hearing what you all go through. And it's just a very poignant reminder of why we in healthcare do what we do, regardless of the condition. We need to continue to work as hard as we can to prevent suffering and prevent these conditions from derailing people's lives. So thank you for sharing your stories. Also, thanks to the FDA for this opportunity. It's actually very encouraging to know that you all are engaged and listening to patients. You have a tough job, and I think it's very important that you hear from the people that are affected as to how this affects their lives. I wanted to I'll be brief, but 3 quick points, and you've heard all of these already today, but I just wanted to sort of punctuate what I see from my chair in taking care of a very large group of people with hereditary angioedema. The first is that while we've made a lot of progress in the last several years, we now have medications that have been shown to be effective and safe. We have not reached the finish line, and I actually think we have a lot of work yet to do to make this what I'd like it to be, which is a very quiet, predictable chronic condition. And I think a lot of the stories I heard today sort of show that this is far from predictable so far. It's still very unpredictable, and it's very troubling and disabling to a lot of people. So pursuing medicines that will lend that predictability to this condition, that's sort of the holy grail in my regard, and we haven't reached that point, so we have work yet to do with developing medications. The second point that you heard about is variability, and it's absolutely true, as you heard from some people, that we do see inter-individual variability to these medications. So while big studies are great to show that these drugs work generally for a group of people, there's a lot of variance, and one of our struggles has been trial and error of figuring out which medicine works best for each person. I think Tony or somebody mentioned precision medicine, and we've had an interest in precision medicine. It takes funding to do those sorts of studies, but we're hopeful with pharmacogenomic studies we'll be better at determining what works best for each person. But because of that, we need a toolbox of choices, and while we have some now, we could use more in turn, because we still have patients that are non-responders or have bad side effects from some of the medications. And the third point I'll just quickly point out is the pediatric issue. We really need more access to medications for children. We all recognize the challenges of doing pediatric studies, and it's a vulnerable population that we don't want to cause any harm. But we really have very limited options for children right now. And this is, as you heard some of the stories, one of the most severely affected groups of people when they have severe symptoms. So just a plea to the FDA to, I know you're working on it, I know the companies are working on it, but whatever we can do to accelerate treatments for children would be of great benefit. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Third speaker, Sandra Christensen, also UCSD.
I may be a little less eloquent than my predecessor and colleague, Dr. Rydell. I would like to first mention that there's really nothing to add to the heartfelt stories that people have shared with us. And as was mentioned, they still tug at your heart, and we have work to do. The career that I've had has spanned over 30 years in HAE, so I remember when we had nothing. We didn't even know why people swelled, and it's been very gratifying to watch the arc and see what we have now, and we're very grateful, as are the patients. I think we owe a testament to the patients that have participated, the pharmaceutical industries that have helped develop these drugs, and the science, and the FDA, and I thank all of you. Mark made a point that I was wanting to emphasize, which we do have a current unmet need in addition to our wish for a brighter future, which is children. And we have a single approved therapy for all ages, and it's intravenous plasma-derived C1 inhibitor. It's not a special qualification, but I'm also a mother. And I can't imagine if one of my daughters, really not good at this, if one of my daughters was suffering and in pain, and the only thing I had to do was start an IV. There is data, which I believe has even been presented to the FDA, on trials in children down to the age of 2, showing safety of a sub-Q treatment for acute relief, a Acatibant. And we've heard the troubles with clinical trials and the ethical issues. And I would not wish perfect to be the enemy of the good. And I would hope that the FDA would consider for this country that it would be appropriate to approve for children what's going to be approved for children in Europe. We also have no prophylactic therapy that's been approved for children. We have safety data. We know things that work. And as Dr. Bussey was saying, it is a huge, huge burden to get drugs approved for individuals. And if there's no indication, it's almost a full-time job battling with third-party payers. So again, low-hanging fruit, data we have, safety we have, need we have. I would hope that people would really urgently consider this while we again hope for more developments and more improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Fourth and last speaker, Bruce Zuer, also UCSD.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you to all the patients who told your stories today. I've been working in hereditary angioedema since 1983, taking care of a lot of patients over that time, and I feel like as I listened to your stories, I was reliving history, the pain that we all went through early on, the lack of treatment, and the remarkable progress that's been made. Obviously, the FDA has been very important. That pharma has been tremendously important. We've come a long way. But as the stories also pointed out today, we're not there. And as my colleagues mentioned, there's still a lot of problems. We're not at all happy. You know, I recognize the progress, but we're not going to stop where we're at. Another issue that's come up repeatedly that we heard today was the trouble finding a physician who would listen, who knew how to treat the disease, knew how to diagnose the disease, and how do we deal with that. And I would like to make a plea, and I know that the FDA has been good about this. As a physician investigator, I threw in my hat many years ago with the HAEA, deciding that if there was one group that could get the word out, that could tell patients where they needed to go, what they should be doing to get the right care, it was the patient advocacy group. And I encourage you to continue to work closely with the HAEA. I think they are the honest broker in the room. And that's the way that patients get to them through the website and get diagnosed and then get treated. So I'd make a couple last quick points. The FDA appropriately is concerned with unmet medical needs in deciding as you go through new drug applications how you gauge an unmet need. And I think it's important to recognize that it's not just abdominal or laryngeal attacks that represent an unmet need. As we've heard today, hand, foot swelling really puts people out of work, out of school, goes on often to involve the abdomen and throat if they weren't treated with on-demand drugs. I think any attack has to be treated as a serious problem and should be recognized as such, in that as you think about the need for new and effective drugs, we really need to get people to the point where we're not having attacks at all before we can say that we've reached where we want to go. And my final point, and philosophically, I think it's an important one, and it doesn't come up very much in medicine. If we can simply replace C1 inhibitor or inhibit kallikrein or perhaps factor 12 adequately, we have a disease now that's life-threatening, that is very highly morbid, that we could essentially completely control. People would be totally normal if we can simply interrupt that one pathway. It's a real opportunity to do something that we almost never get to do in medicine, which is to make people completely whole. And I know it keeps me going in this field, wanting to push forward, and I hope the FDA, realizes the opportunity that we have as we move towards the future. And again, I want to thank you for having this meeting and for listening to all of these stories all day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can't thank you enough. We're going to invite Dr. Larissa Leptiva up here to summarize the meeting, and she's actually going to say goodbye, but I'm not leaving here until I tell you how moved I was, how appreciative I was that you were able to tell me your stories and your experiences. I will be forever touched by what I've heard. And there. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how appreciative I am.
Good afternoon. So we have come to the concluding part of our meeting. It's been a day full of honest sharing, compassionate understanding, vivid descriptions, moving stories, and above all, hope for future treatments, for new therapies that can change the course of hereditary angioedema more so than the currently available treatments. On behalf of my colleagues, I would like to extend our appreciation to the participating patients and families, to all those who came here in person and those who participated with us online. We have learned and will continue learning a great deal from you. Today we heard about what patients and families care about, what worries people, and what makes them feel better, and what kind of effects they would like to see from their treatments. And in the next few minutes, I will try to summarize some of the issues that have been discussed. During the first session, we heard about frequent delays in the diagnosis of hereditary angioedema. Over 50% of people who participated in our poll here in the room said that the time that took from the initial symptoms to the diagnosis was about 10 years or longer. By having meetings like the one we had today, and by continuing the efforts of multiple stakeholders, including educating healthcare providers, including continuing efforts by advocacy organizations, patient advocacy organizations, we hope to improve the recognition of this rare disease. We also heard from patients who have family history of hereditary angioedema, from patients who are adults, and also from parents and siblings of children and adult patients who live with the condition. We heard about the unpredictability of the attacks and how it is actually to feel this, to live with this feeling of unpredictability, not knowing when an attack will come and what part of the body it will involve. We heard about the painful abdominal episodes that often require medical care, even intensive care, to be treated to resolution. Many people mentioned the discomforting, painful, and disfiguring attacks of different body parts that interfere with all activities of daily life, prevent going to work, to school, prevent from doing any kinds of activities, social activities, make people unable to care for themselves, for their children, feeling left out. We have also heard about the exacerbating effects on hereditary angioedema of some activities that many of us who don't have the condition may take for granted, which may range from exercising to doing some repetitive motions, to getting dental work done, or having a gynecological exam, to giving birth to a child, to sometimes simply being excited and happy or stressed about something. A number of people commented about the influences of hormonal background, particularly in female patients, that often are experienced during the adolescent years as well as perimenopausal years. Depression, anxiety, fatigue, drug-seeking accusations, unnecessary surgeries remain a reality for hereditary angioedema community. Many people mentioned their greatest fear and their biggest concern, which is the possibility of developing a laryngeal attack and not being able to treat it rapidly and effectively. Endotracheal intubations and tracheostomies do remain not to be an uncommon practices. We heard about the life-changing experiences with the availability of treatments for hereditary angioedema, and even more so, the vital importance of not only attack treatments, but also prophylactic treatments. Over 60% of folks who participated here in our poll in the room do receive prophylactic treatments of different kinds. and the role and the place of the prophylactic treatments cannot really be overemphasized. They significantly improve the quality of life, they increase the time between attacks, and more importantly, they provide peace of mind to patients and families. In terms of product benefits, most of our poll participants indicated that the new therapies, they look for both a reduction in attack frequency and attack severity, although I do recognize that that question really called for all answers to be yes, which you would want to see reduction in attack frequency and severity and the rapidity of the response and the completeness of the response. Yet, please also recognize that this information does help us to better guide product development. In addition to various sources of scientific information that we do take into consideration, this helps us to really better design future studies and select study endpoints. So thank you for answering all of these different questions. In terms of risks, people remain concerned about various side effects. Common side effects may not be as much of a concern. Only 7% of people said that they would take them into consideration. Serious but uncommon side effects remain a concern. But again, the adverse effects always, as was mentioned by a number of participants, would need to be taken into consideration within the framework of the benefits that you would get from the treatment. So we always take it as a benefit risk assessment. Well, from what we've heard, there is still a long way to the cure and to the complete control and prevention of each and every attack that may occur in each individual. There is still a need for less invasive therapies, for therapies that take into consideration the hormonal background and hormonal changes that may occur in patients. There are still issues with IV access. There are still issues with infections. So we do need better treatments, newer treatments, more helpful treatments. There is still a need to observe long-term effects of the current treatments and to develop newer treatments not only for adults but also for children, and to ensure smarter designs of future drug trials with inclusion of methodologies that could help collecting patient input and incorporating input of patients into the product benefit risk assessment. Our polling questions results here in the room showed that about 65% of patients would like to participate in clinical trials. And 100% of people, you've seen it, would want to participate in observational studies. So following this meeting, we will summarize the discussion and the lessons learned in the Voice of the Patient report, which you've heard about, which we will post online. And as here at the FDA, we continue our efforts to facilitate the development of safe and effective new treatments. It is really the voice of patients that guides us in the right direction. Patient advocacy is very strong among the hereditary angioedema community, and today's meeting really would not have been the same without the tremendous support of the Hereditary Angioedema Association. On behalf of my colleagues, I would like to thank the association for always taking the proactive stance in supporting their community in many aspects, from distributing relevant information about the disease to patients and families, to promoting development of new products, to providing substantive support to the community in times of product shortages, and much more. Thank you for doing the great job that you do. The work of patient advocacy groups like yours remains of utmost importance to all of us. I would like to thank everyone who helped to organize this meeting. It was really an effort coordinated across the FDA with participation from different centers and offices, with the leading role of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. And much appreciation should go to the office and the center leadership for their endorsing and really very attentive support of not only this meeting, but also many other collaborations related to patient advocacy and to incorporating patient input in developing new therapies. And finally, I would like to thank all of the participants of today's meeting. As healthcare professionals, researchers, industry partners, FDA staffers, regulators, we humbly learn from you, the patients, every day. And today's meeting is yet another testimony of how much you can tell us in order to help moving medical progress into the future. Thank you for that. Thank you, and safe travels back home. We adjourn.